Hello! Thank you for being in a new video. This time I have the VIVO V29 in my hands. Let's give it a full review. This device is part of the premium mid-range of this manufacturer, giving very attractive features for those who still do not want to spend so much on a flagship, but already wants to have a device with considerably advanced features. At the moment, it has been launched in Chile and probably also in other regions. In Mexico, it is not on sale. So let me share with you the official price of the launch in Chile. So it's 549,990 Chilean pesos. On screen, you see more or less the reference price in dollars to give you an idea, but remember that the prices here are not the same as over there. I must say that prices in Mexico are always much higher, and that is why I am surprised to see this device at that price. In the Mexican market, it would easily cost much more. So it seems to me that I will probably be surprised in several things, but I will try to show you absolutely everything that I like and what I don't like. So let's start describing it point by point. Definitely that the aesthetics of this device is very nice, as it integrates not only curved screen but also two reduced bezels that result in a design with a very high use of the front with respect to the screen. Actually, the fact of having a curved screen gives it a very attractive touch, although in terms of resistance it probably won't get the 5 stars because it doesn't have Gorilla Glass, although Vivo probably does integrate in this device a considerably resistant glass. But I think it would give us much more security to know that it has Gorilla Glass. However, we could not consider it a fragile device at all, as it does integrate IP68 certification, so if it is dropped in water, it will survive with high probabilities. It is only 7.46 millimeters thick, so it's extremely thin and it's also very light, weighing in at 186 grams. It integrates a plastic side frame with a metal look. However, it is a very thin frame because both the screen and the back cover are curved. On this right side, we have the power button along with the volume buttons. On the top, we have microphones and a text that says Professional Portrait. On the left side, there is absolutely nothing. And on the bottom, we have the tray where we can put the nano SIM card. In fact, you can place 2 nano SIM cards, although this may vary depending on the region. In this bottom part, there is also another microphone, the USB-C port, and finally, we have the speaker. The back cover also seems to be made of glass, and it really has a very nice feel in the hand. The matte finish that this edition has in noble black color is very nice. It is also available in a summit blue color option. And one of the main differentiating elements of this device will be this light ring that will help for portraits. However, it seems to me that it is slightly wasted, as they could make better use of it as a kind of notification LED or call indicator, but it will only serve for photos. In summary of the design, I think it is very nice with good resistance, although the glass is the one that makes me doubt a little more. The screen is another very strong element of this equipment, as it has a size of 6.78 inches, offering very good viewing space, and it also offers us an AMOLED technology, which of course will give us intense colors and high contrasts as well as good viewing angles. Of course, it's not a flagship level display today, but it is a display that will give you a very good level of viewing, as it has a resolution of 2800 by 1260 pixels, which overall gives us a pixel density of 452 pixels per inch, which means that it will have very good level of detail. This is one of those displays that I would recommend if you like to share content in a group, because even if there are people viewing the content from the side, they're still going to have a good viewing experience. Also, it's a display that reaches up to 120 Hz in its refresh rate, so it can show us fluid movements in all the system animations and movements, and it's able to intelligently adjust itself to switch between 120 or 60 Hz. Obviously, it is not a screen as advanced as the ones we find in flagships, capable of going down to 1 Hz, but anyway, I find it a positive thing that it does have automatic adjustment of its refresh rate. The sound will be one of the weak points of this device, as it only has a speaker at the bottom, so we have mono sound with acceptable quality. The mid frequencies stand out more over the rest of the frequencies, causing the sound to feel not so balanced. So personally, that's what I liked least about this device. But how about listening to a little test? Though remember, it's not the same listening to it live. Besides that, it does not offer an equalizer, not even when we have headphones connected, but it does offer us some additional software options to improve the quality of the audio we are perceiving. It also includes a selector of a specific model of headphones of the same brand, so you can listen to it as best as possible. It only has some presets for the type of sound it can project, but since it does not have stereo sound, we could not speak of an immersive experience. However, the tool I did like was the Bluetooth audio redirection tool, so you can send the sound of some applications to Bluetooth devices, keeping the sound of other applications playing directly from the local device. Now you're about to hear an audio recording with these microphones.
Esta es una prueba de audio grabada con el VIVO V29 5G, un dispositivo de la gama media premium que sin duda alguna ofrece buenas características.
But although it looks like it has 3 microphones, in reality there are only 2, one on the top and one on the bottom. So it simply remains as expected without surprising. Regarding audio, you should also note that it has no headphone jack, and if you want to use wireless headphones, in addition to the SPC and AAC codecs, it also supports the aptX adaptive codec, with which you can have higher resolution audio using wireless headphones. So I think that's a good thing. The front camera is 50 megapixels with f2.0 point aperture and autofocus. Of course, pictures won't come out at 50 megapixels unless you tell it to with a special mode, but it will do pixel merging, which should improve the results tremendously. Interestingly, by default it switches to portrait mode when you enable the front camera. So it's important that you realize this because the background will be blurred automatically unless you switch to photo mode. Thanks to the very high-resolution camera, we will have several levels of zoom, including 2x zoom. And with respect to the capture speed, we do have something positive in the first 2 pictures, although after that it gets a bit slower. If we hold down the shutter, we won't have any burst. And fortunately, it has different capture modes to have a much easier capture, including the option to show the palm of the hand to enable a small timer. There's also an option to enable some filters, but you can't preview them in real time unless you tap on them. Within portrait mode, you can disable blur, and you also have controls for beauty mode with lots and lots of parameters like automatic retouching, or you can also go manual by selecting parameters like blurring the skin, changing the tone, whitening the face, further defining the expressions, modifying the profile. Well, there are too many options that allow you to modify your face as you want if you want to look very fake. In fact, it also brings predefined makeup options and also a gallery of poses if you don't know how to pose for your picture, which is a kind of template that will appear on the screen for you to fill in with your face so that you have more ideas when taking pictures. This kind of features are only present in live mode. In fact, it also has an option to have overlays. That is, you can place a small layer on top of the photo to give it a different style. And I insist that these things I have only seen on devices from this manufacturer. Automatically, the photos come out at 13 megapixels, but if you enter the high resolution mode, you can get this type of ultra detailed photos on the front camera, which is not something I consider so necessary, but it's good to know that this option is available. Outdoors, we could say it's a considerably good camera, although I don't find the color accuracy to be the most remarkable thing about it. However, the best thing about this camera, without a doubt, will be the good level of detail it is capable of achieving, and also that it has autofocus. So, if you're very close to the camera, it's also going to come out exaggeratedly detailed. The same thing will happen if you're far away from the camera with your arm outstretched thanks to this autofocus feature. Indoors, the result is still good. In fact, I find that the color is more accurate indoors than outdoors. We still have a good level of detail, not as much as outdoors, but it seems to me that even merging the pixels still maintains a very good quality. Yes, there is a little noise present in the darker areas, but it's really nothing serious. In backlight, the preview does not look optimized, but the subsequent result does balance highlights and shadows well, although in this case we also noticed that having autofocus, there could be some moments where the background is in focus but the foreground is not, so pay attention to that part. At night, the results are also very detailed, but the color's a bit pale. Also in this case I enabled the beauty mode and it automatically removes a bit of beard, trying to have a smoother face. So I find the facial retouching a bit overdone at times, but if you disable it, you can easily have a well detailed photograph, and I even like the color even better. In this case it's a photograph with night mode. Now you're looking at a picture with indirect light without night mode, so you can see the difference, because here we still have a good level of detail, but it's not as high as what we see in this other picture, which is with night mode. All lines are better defined, we have better contrast and better color as well. Even if you use the screen as a flash simulation, it seems to me that the color saturation on the skin comes out much better. Look at this other picture, which is much more complicated at night with backlight. In automatic mode the result is very bad, but with the night mode the truth is that the result improves just enough. Finally, in portraits, notice that it more or less keeps the objects in focus, but it does not have a good dynamic range, having very burned areas in the background, but fortunately the detection of faces is good. However, I could not consider it an expert in frontal portraits. However, the bokeh effect is nice, especially if you don't have any kind of object nearby, giving a considerably natural result. However, the colors are not as saturated as we would have liked. Therefore, it does not seem to me to be a high-end photo, but according to its price. On the back we have three cameras. The main one is 50 megapixels with f1.88 aperture, autofocus and optical stabilization. We also have an 8 megapixel ultra-wide camera with f2.2 aperture and fixed focus. And finally we have a 2 megapixel depth capture camera for portraits with an f aperture of 2.4. The speed of photo capture is considerably good for capturing the exact moment, and note that the burst seems to take a long time to react, although it does manage to take several pictures, but having a delayed response may cause it to be not so easy to capture the exact moment using the burst. Again, it has a filter button that we can apply one by one, and it also includes a natural color option. In case you want less saturated colors. If you tap on the screen, you can adjust the focus and also the exposure. But within the list of modes will also be present the professional mode. Through this mode you can move practically all the parameters you want, such as exposure compensation, ISO, exposure speed, focus, metering type and more. And it also allows you to take pictures in RAW for further advanced development. It also allows you to scan a document from the main mode, giving you the suggestion to enter document mode, so it will automatically do the cropping for you. I don't consider it to be the most accurate, but what you can do is send it to print as a PDF if you select the print option, so it may come in handy for several people. Unfortunately, from the main camera you can't scan QR codes, although it has direct access to Google Lens in the upper left corner, so you can perform this action. The device is capable of taking 50 megapixel photos in high resolution mode in case you want to crop after capturing the photo to maintain a good level of detail. Only in this mode it seems to me that we don't have such advanced behavior in backlight and other things. But fortunately it seems that it does manage to maintain a high enough level of detail. However, notice how the picture gains much more saturation when you are using the automatic mode, having very intense colors. Although even in these outdoor shots you get to notice a bit of chromatic aberration in this lens and small distortions or blurring at the edges. So it doesn't feel like an extremely high-end camera, but good enough. Now you're looking at a reference picture with the main camera, and then we switch to the ultra-wide camera, so you can see that we do have a little bit more width, but we don't really gain too much difference over the main camera, plus we don't have as much level of detail, and this lens has a lot more distortion and chromatic aberration. So, the ultra-wide camera really didn't seem that spectacular to me. Indoors, with the main camera, it maintains good color saturation and virtually no noise even in the darkest areas. So I really liked the result. And with the ultra-wide camera in this type of conditions where there is not so much illumination, it seems that the result is better since the chromatic aberration is practically null because there is no light in the background. And in this case it maintains a good level of detail, good color saturation and more. In backlit conditions, notice how the preview looks totally burned out in the brighter areas, but after taking the picture, the processing is good enough. I think it could still do a much better job, but at least the sky doesn't come out completely burned out. Although I insist that this lens generates a lot of chromatic aberration, and in this kind of backlit scenes, it is likely to become much more noticeable. At night, the main camera takes a good picture, as in fact it does not have so much difference with respect to the night mode. We could say that the result is totally the same with the automatic mode and with the night mode, giving a good result with good level of detail and very good noise management. The ultra-wide camera also has a good performance in this type of conditions to surprise, since most ultra-wide cameras have a slightly inferior behavior, but in this case, it sincerely has good amplitude and good light management. Two aspects that often do not come together. Regarding the zoom, we will only have digital zoom since this device does not have the presence of any specific lens, but from the zoom 2x we still notice a good level of detail, although it is noticeable that it is digital zoom. Then we can move on to the photograph with zoom 5x, and honestly I find that it still maintains an excellent level of detail. Next, you're looking at the 10x zoom, where you again notice that it's digital zoom and the maximum it allows you to get to is 20x. It doesn't look as forced, so I think it could still be a good result. However, the zoom is not one of its strongest points. By the way, I had also forgotten to mention the presence of panoramic photography using the main camera of very good quality, because you can hardly notice the fusion between one photo and the other. The result is with good color, good dynamic range, and overall good level of detail. I had also forgotten to mention that the device has a supermoon mode where you can take this kind of pictures, which I find considerably good, although obviously assisted by artificial intelligence. The main camera has the ability to adjust its focus to close objects, so macro photography is well covered, although you have to be at a distance not so close to maintain an even focus. You could also apply a little bit of digital zoom to get a little closer, and I actually find the result to be considerably good, so I don't consider the addition of a macro camera necessary. Portrait photography does seem to me to be one of the highlights of this device, as it has a good detection of objects in the foreground, a nice bokeh effect in the background as well. Obviously it is not a perfect detection, but for the price I think it does take good portraits, plus it also comes out with good dynamic range and good textures. In fact, something remarkable is that it also allows you to take portrait shots in 2x, and it's really not that obvious that it's digital zoom while maintaining a good level of detail. And something interesting about this camera is that it has a ring light on the back that you can use for portrait shots at night. You can adjust the color temperature of this light to better match the environment. For example, in this case, the picture came out too warm, but notice how changing the color temperature makes for a much nicer picture, with a nice blur. So I really like that you can change this setting on the light. This is another picture with the cooler setting, and I think it balanced very well with the ambient lighting that was there. So, it gives you a lot more versatility unlike other devices that just throw the flash, as this is a much softer light that doesn't even reflect too much on the lens, and so I easily loved its strong point. Lastly, I had also forgotten to mention that it is very fast when capturing moving objects, so they don't come out shaky or anything like that, giving good pictures also in sports matters. The video recording of this device can go up to 4K at 30 frames per second, but only the main camera is capable of recording at that quality. In fact, if you want to record at 60 frames per second, the ultra-wide camera will not be able to record at this resolution either. So, the video recording experience in terms of supporting high resolution with a high frame rate per second is not very good here. When you start your video recording, we're going to have a slider here for zoom, although we don't have presets to jump directly between one magnification and another. We can take a picture and also pause and resume the content. In addition, it also allows us to turn on the flashlight without the need to stop our video recording. And finally, we can enable noise cancellation to improve voice pickup. This is a small detail that I had not found in another device. Something remarkable is that in video recording you can also apply some color effects while maintaining full HD resolution, and we can also enable some beauty options for the face and again maintaining full HD quality. Finally, we also have the option to enable a portrait recording mode, which is still in full HD, albeit at 24 frames per second, but it is remarkable that this option exists. We'll talk about it later. It does not have a professional video recording mode, but it does have some templates called microfilm, so you can explore the template you like, download it, and then start your recording, and everything will be applied with the same effect, so you do not need to edit your video later, but from the recording already appears with this filter. This is a remarkable option because usually in other devices you should buy an application to have all these options, but Vivo includes them in its native camera. The video recording seems to me to be of good quality. maintaining an intense saturation of colors and of course a good level of detail. Also, in these types of outdoor conditions, it is not seen to have problems with exposure or inconsistent white balance. Indoors, we will see a very similar result, having good color, although in this case we feel a little more presence of noise, especially in the darker areas. But it seems to me that the video quality is considerably good. In backlight, the result is not going to be positive because it gives total priority to illuminate the face. Then, when it stops detecting the face, it is able to better balance the most illuminated area. Fortunately, however, the change is not that drastic, but even without having the face present, the result is not as balanced. In the evenings, we are going to have a slightly pale result, although fortunately the noise handles it well. That's not to say it's not present, but it does seem to reduce it considerably. It just seems to me to be a result that lacks a bit more color and more saturation to make it totally good. Remember that you can turn on the small illumination you have. However, it is a very soft light that doesn't really illuminate very well. However, the good thing is that you can change its temperature to have a warmer or cooler tone. The device also has a super night recording mode, but it reduces the frames per second to 19. So it's not recommended for recording things with a lot of movement because it will look a bit weird. The ultra-wide camera, you will also notice that it has a much lower performance compared to the main camera when recording night video, having much less light input and therefore less level of detail. Indoors, this ultra-wide camera also feels of a lower quality, and remember that it only records in Full HD. However, if you are recording in Full HD, yes, you can switch to the main camera without stopping your video recording. But from here, you're also noticing that the zoom moves a bit weird, with very aggressive jumps, and the difference between the main camera and the ultra-wide camera also feels very drastic. If you're shooting in 4K, you're only going to be able to use the main camera and the zoom feels quite forced and there's a lot of noise in the image. So even though it lets you go up to 20x with good stabilization, the quality is not really remarkable. This device allows you to turn the stabilization on or off. In this case, you're looking first at a clip with stabilization disabled so you can see how terrible it can be, especially if you're running. But here you now have a clip with stabilization enabled, and it's nice that it keeps the 4K resolution. Movements are very well disguised when you're walking, although when you're running the stabilization is still not so extreme as to score a video with virtually no movement. However, it also comes with an ultra stabilization mode that goes in Full HD at 60 frames per second, and definitely with this you can better regulate the movements when running. However, you do need very good lighting. The focus seems to me to be considerably good in aggressive movements, both from the second to the foreground. And with respect to subtle movements, you also feel a focus that is adjusted little by little without hesitating too much, although the precision does not seem to be the highest. But I think it is an aspect where it does come to meet for its price range. Something remarkable is that this device also lets us record video with portrait mode, blurring the background, applying a bokeh effect. This result is in Full HD and seems to keep the hands in focus. The color feels a bit saturated, and even if it stops detecting the face, it still maintains the effect. And even the blur intensity gets to vary slightly as you move closer or further away from the camera, which is remarkable. You'll also notice that it has good stabilization even within this mode. And what caught my attention the most is that it does manage to keep objects in focus, something that at this price no other is going to offer you. This device has two slow motion modes, the first in Full HD at 120 frames per second. I think that's considerably good quality for a device at this price point, and you can even go slower, up to 240 frames per second, though only in HD. However, for publications such as Instagram platforms or the like, I think the result will look considerably attractive. Fast motion could also be attractive, although its lowest level is 15x, which for people could still be very fast. But the highest can go up to 960x, with which you could get to record much more spectacular scenery. And it should even be noted that the fast camera is in 4K, so the result is very good. The front camera can also record video in 4K, which is quite remarkable. Unfortunately, it does not come with stabilization in this mode, but it does offer good color. However, in backlighting it does not perform well, as it will be almost completely burned out in that area. Fortunately, having autofocus allows content creators to show things closer to their audience. Indoors, there is a lot more noise present using this camera, although it maintains good color saturation and detail. And another remarkable thing about this camera is that it does have the bokeh effect in the front video, only again without good stabilization. But fortunately it does manage to keep more or less focused the hand, although the objects definitely does not focus them, so it is not so remarkable, but it does get to highlight that a team of this price has this mode. What the front camera will not have is slow motion or fast motion, but the good news is that this device does have a dual recording mode, although it is in full HD, so it allows you to capture both angles of the scene. It also has zoom and autofocus enabled. However, it does not allow you to switch to the ultra-wide camera until you stop recording video, nor does it allow you to move the floating frame we have there. Another mode available would be to record with the ultra-wide camera and the main camera at the same time. However, it seems that the focus is locked in this format and I honestly don't consider it that useful. Finally, you can also record with the front camera in larger size, which still has autofocus enabled. However, you can't swap cameras without stopping the video recording, so the implementation I think could be much improved. By the way, later we noticed that you can move the frame, but only before starting your video recording, and once you have started, it is impossible to move that frame. This device comes with Android 13 and Phone Touch OS 13. The manufacturer promises 2 years of software updates and 3 years of security patches for this model, which even though it is not the highest in the industry today, I still think it is a good thing. You should know that this customization layer is very light, so it simply modifies part of the aesthetics of the device and adds a few features. For starters, we have the always-on display option, which has different styles that we can apply. It does not have an exhaustive customization, but at least it does have several configurations for you to choose the one you like the most. It also has ambient light effects that will allow you, having the screen off, to have the edges of the screen making some special effect, both when you are listening to music and when a call is coming in, and even when you receive a notification by selecting specific applications. In fact, the device lets you change all the animations, including the animations to return to the home screen, the lock screen animations, also the animation of the fingerprint icon, the animation when you are unlocking with the fingerprint, also the facial recognition animation, the charging process animation, and also when you connect a USB cable. So it has very good customization in this section of animations. But basically that's all that the manufacturer adds, as it feels a very close experience to pure Android with respect to functions. It also adds ultra gaming mode, but we'll talk about that later when we describe the performance. And something I was forgetting to show you is that this device does have the option to open apps in a small window, although it doesn't have a sidebar with which you can more easily open these types of tools, but it seems very useful to be able to be doing several things at the same time. However, it also notes that YouTube does not support that mode, although Instagram does. Finally, it also notes that you can only open one floating app at a time, but it's a tool that can come in handy. This device has an optical fingerprint reader that has sufficient speed and accepts up to 5 registrations, so I think it's a considerably good and aesthetically modern experience. I already mentioned to you that you can indeed change the animation effects, and also the device features facial recognition. Although remember that it is a simple recognition, only 2-dimensional, so it is not so recommended if your priority is security, since even the device itself gives you some warnings that people similar to you could unlock your device as well. But if you do not want to have to be unlocking your cell phone every time, remember that Google Smart Lock also brings, so you can set conditions of trust so that the device remains unlocked. This device also includes an application lock section, where you can select which applications you want to request your fingerprint or your face again, even though the device is already unlocked, and you also have the option to hide applications, and if you enable this option, they will only be displayed when you slide 2 fingers up, obviously verifying your face or your fingerprint. And within the iManager app, it also offers us some additional tools like cloning apps to use 2 accounts on the same device, and it also offers us a security scan as a kind of antivirus by Avast. So we have good security options, in addition to the options that Google itself brings, such as Find My Device in case it is lost. The battery is 4,600,000 amps and offers us a performance that I think goes according to that capacity. That is, it is not so surprising, since in my test I managed to discharge 50% of the energy in about 2 hours and 10 minutes. That's one of the sacrifices in exchange for having such a thin device. So I don't find it to have amazing battery life, although fortunately it does have a traditional battery saver mode for day-to-day use that might help you out. It doesn't have a much more aggressive power saving mode, though fortunately it does let you select the behavior of apps running in the background. You should know that by default, it has an overly aggressive management that will shut down pretty much everything that is running in the background. So if you want to prevent some apps from being suspended and stop sending you notifications, you should enter here and set it to not restrict background power usage. So in this aspect, I think it could still improve a lot. The charger included in the box is 80 watts and I find it a really very good experience. In 15 minutes it recovers 33% of the energy, in 30 minutes 70%, and the charge to 100 finishes in 49 minutes. It additionally brings an option to optimize battery life that is going to learn your charging patterns. So in case you are one of those users who leave your device connected for a long time to the current, the device will charge much slower so as not to damage the battery. So this is a smart charge that is positive, but it doesn't have a charge lock like some other devices do. In terms of connectivity, we will find something positive but not the most advanced of the moment, as it integrates Wi-Fi 5 but still gives a very good download speed. It also brings support for 5G networks, which is a very good thing, especially if in your country is already a considerably high network quality. But something very remarkable about this device is that you can put two SIMs. It can be a physical SIM or it can be an eSIM. This can be extremely useful, especially when you go on a trip, because you can buy plans and you just scan a QR code and you add your SIM card instead of going to physically buy that chip. So I really find it a very nice thing to have this eSIM experience from a premium mid-range device, because these features are usually only on high-end devices. It also brings the option to select which applications you want to have the ability to use your mobile data and which applications do not. This way you avoid unwanted surprises in your mobile data consumption. It also has Bluetooth 5.2. I believe it will maintain a good connection stability. It has NFC to make mobile payments or connect to link to other devices. It also supports wireless screen projection with good capabilities, so that, for example, you can have your screen turned off so that you're not consuming as much power while you're doing the projection. You also prevent notifications from appearing on the wireless projection for more privacy. And you can project only images or videos to be doing other things on your cell phone while the projection is being made. So it really is a much more advanced projection than what other devices offer. We also find OTG, although curiously this one turns on and off, unlike other devices in which the option is always on. It also has Android Auto to connect to the screen of your vehicle either by cable or wirelessly. And finally, with respect to sensors, it has everything we could ask for, including also a physical proximity sensor, so we have no drawbacks in this aspect. The live ecosystem can vary a lot depending on the regions. In the case of Mexico, it is a very short ecosystem. And in the case of Chile and probably other Latin American countries, it is also a short catalog. However, in Asia and other regions, it is likely that they do have many more compatible products. So it still feels like a very short ecosystem. They only have some Vivo True Wireless Stereo Neo headphones, but at least on this side of the world, they don't have a tablet, they don't have a watch, they don't have computers or anything like that. So it doesn't feel like such a strong brand in this aspect. Cloud storage is totally dependent on what Google gives you with their whole 15 gigabyte package. And obviously you can pay subscription to extend that. And to control your home devices, you can use Google Home, again depending on Google. So I insist that it doesn't yet feel like a strong branded experience. Let's do the app opening test. This device has the Snapdragon 778G processor. A considerably good processor, although no longer as modern, but it seems to me that it's still a good choice for a device of this price. It is accompanied by 8 gigabytes of physical RAM and another 8 virtual gigabytes and 256 gigabytes of storage. It took about 3.3 seconds on average to open each application. And I think that's not that remarkable a time. Some animations seem to take a little bit of work to run. For some reason, I didn't feel the experience as smooth when opening the apps. However, once they are open, it seems like the performance is going to be much smoother to be switching back and forth between them. So it seems that the physical and virtual RAM is well utilized. From my point of view, 8 gigabytes of physical RAM is more than enough, so I don't see as much need to enable virtual RAM. But you yourself are seeing how some animations are a bit hard to move, and so it may stumble your experience a little bit. But that's just if you're one of those users that uses too much speed on the device. Because if not, just having a little patience, you will have a good experience. Let's try now how it is exporting a 1-minute long video in 4K, which is the maximum quality that this device supports, to see more or less its export capabilities. It took 1 minute and 14 seconds. I think that even though it can record video in 4K, it is not so recommended to edit video in 4K because we are not talking about a flagship device yet. Let's talk about gaming, and for that we are going to mention the Ultra Game mode included in this device. You can select all the games you have installed. You can also tell it whether or not you want it to show you the sidebar that we'll see in a moment. And we have settings here for esports mode, where it tells us everything it's going to do, like prevent interruptions from calls or messages. It also disables any kind of on-screen gestures, so you can have a much faster response. It optimizes the speed and more. Then you as a user can select whether or not you want calls to be blocked, or even if you want it to reject any calls while you are playing. What I don't like is that you can't add exceptions. When you enter a game, this little bar will appear where you can see the CPU and GPU consumption. In addition, you can change the power profile, whether you want to give it the highest boost so that the device goes with full power, or you can also have a kind of balanced mode or battery saving mode if you want to play some very long games but giving priority to the battery lasting much longer. From this side panel, you can also select whether you want calls to be enabled in the background without interrupting you. You can also tell it to immediately reject calls, block notifications, and we have something very interesting called motion control, where we can map a specific button and then we can simply rotate the phone to perform that action. Let's show an example mapping these two buttons. Here you just turn it on and look, you can map tilt left, tilt right, and also go up left or up right, and well, you can even do these. So obviously it's a little bit complex, but you can have a learning curve and then after that take advantage of all this. Let's then put this button here, and I'm going to put tilt right, the second button, so that we finally have a smooth experience. Notice then how I can jump now by simply turning the device, and I can hit by turning to the other side. This can become useful especially in shooter games, where maybe you can simply reload the gun by doing a backward gesture there. It's up to you as a user how you want to get to take advantage of this feature, but it's a very attractive feature that's not usually present on other devices. We will also have an option to optimize the view. This is very useful also in games that are a little dark, because you will see better those details. We have an automatic brightness lock, very useful because there are times that you get to cover the light sensor, and in case the game is downloading content and do not want to consume so much energy, you can select this option so that the screen somehow turns off but the game continues downloading. You also have the direct option of WhatsApp picture-in-picture, so that it opens in this format and you can be chatting while you are playing, and finally you can take screenshots in image and video. You can also modify how you want these shortcuts to appear, but I find it very curious that you cannot add more applications to open as WhatsApp, which would be wonderful. In Call of Duty by default it loads the quality very high, and you can even enable the maximum frames per second rate. Having a Qualcomm Snapdragon processor, if you have access to several special filters, and we can even enable the experimental super resolution as well. Although in this case it was not able to give us a smooth experience at 60 frames per second, however it can become understandable because it is not a flagship processor. However, in other devices it had given us a slightly better performance, although it didn't have the super resolution features yet, so that could somehow affect the performance slightly. I think it is advisable in this device to play with a high graphics quality but not the highest available, so that it can give you a much greater fluidity when playing. It should also be noted that it did not heat up as much, but I do not think it is a device that is 100% focused on users who like to play with very high qualities at extreme rates of frames per second. In the case of Legends, the detail is always on automatic, but we bumped it up to high quality at 60 frames per second for this test. It should be noted that by default the game does not fill the screen, but despite that, if we came to give a good average frames per second with good stability, then really the experience in this game, if you can become positive simply with this drawback that I mentioned not to have filled the screen, however the graphic detail and fluidity definitely give a good experience. In the case of SpongeBob, by default this device loads the low resolution and high quality. For our test we set the high resolution, high quality at 60 frames per second. Here you simply have to disable the lack of smoothing that is available on other processors. The experience is undoubtedly a good one. Although recording the screen may lose a little more performance in this and other games. However, if you don't record the screen, you will have even more fluidity. But as you can see, even if you record the screen, I think the stability is considerably good to have a good experience playing and making gameplays. Only for being 2023, I think we could ask for a more modern processor, because although this processor is still considerably good, it starts to feel a little old. In Genshin Impact, by default, the device loads low graphics quality. For the test, we set it to medium quality, also raising the quality of the effects to medium and 60 frames per second. Motion blur remained at low. And even though we set it to 60 frames per second from the start, the device limited the performance to 40 frames per second, possibly to avoid overheating, as it really does give us a good experience in terms of temperature control. However, it is not going to push the device to the limit, so do not expect this device to be able to give you extreme fluidity with very high graphic qualities for that if you would require a high-end device. However, for the price, I think it will give us a good experience. I do not think it is a gaming specialist, because probably for this price, if you can get to find other alternatives. But remember that the device is not only for gaming, so I think if you want to use it in general and play from time to time, if you will give you a good experience. And for the moment, we have reached the end of this video. I hope you liked it. If so, you know you can tell us, and we'll see you next time.